When Ginny broke down, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, no moment that demanded attention. It was quiet, and that was what made it so heavy. The kind of breakdown that happens when someone has been holding themselves together for far too long, smiling through exhaustion, nodding through pressure, convincing everyone, including themselves, that they're fine. For weeks, Ginny had been pushing through nonstop schedules. Early mornings that blurred into late nights. Rehearsals that demanded perfection. Public appearances that required energy she didn't always have. To the outside world, she looked the same as always, professional, composed, reliable. But inside, something was slowly unraveling. Jayna noticed before anyone else did. She noticed the pauses in Ginny's speech, the way her hands sometimes trembled when she thought no one was looking. She noticed how Ginny laughed a little too quickly, how she avoided sitting down because sitting meant stopping, and stopping meant feeling everything she was trying to ignore. Jayna didn't say anything at first. She simply stayed close. Their relationship hadn't always been easy. In the beginning, there was distance. Not hostility, but unfamiliarity. They came from different emotional worlds. Ginny processed pain internally, believing strength meant endurance. Jayna believed strength meant awareness, knowing when to step in and when to stay quiet. They orbited each other carefully, learning without asking. The moment everything changed came late one evening, long after most of the staff had left. The building was quiet in a way that made thoughts echo louder. Ginny had stayed behind, telling everyone she needed to review a few things. Jayna had no real reason to stay, but she did anyway. At first, they sat in silence, comfortable but charged. Then Ginny's shoulders dropped, just slightly, as if her body had finally given up pretending. Her breathing changed. Shallow, uneven. She tried to steady herself, but the weight she'd been carrying finally became too much. The tears came without warning. Ginny turned away instinctively, embarrassed, apologetic even in her own vulnerability. She muttered something about being tired, about needing a moment, about being fine. But Jayna didn't move. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush to fix it. She simply stayed. That was the moment that mattered. Jayna shifted closer, not touching at first, just closing the distance enough to say, without words, "You're not alone." When Ginny finally covered her face, overwhelmed by everything she had been holding in, Jayna gently placed a hand on her back. Steady, grounding, no pressure, no demand. Ginny cried harder then, not because she was falling apart, but because someone had seen her and hadn't turned away. There were no speeches, no dramatic reassurances. Jayna didn't tell her to be strong. She didn't say everything would be okay. She said something much simpler. She said, "You don't have to do this by yourself." For Ginny, that sentence changed everything. It wasn't just comfort. It was permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to rest. Permission to admit that strength doesn't mean never breaking. It means allowing someone to stand with you when you do. After that night, things shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. Ginny didn't suddenly become a different person. She didn't share everything. She didn't stop being private. But she softened. She allowed pauses. She allowed silence without filling it. And Jayna remained close, not hovering, not controlling, just present. People around them noticed the change before they understood it. Ginny seemed lighter, even on difficult days. Jayna became more openly protective, stepping in when schedules became overwhelming, redirecting attention when Ginny needed space. It wasn't dramatic. It was consistent. Fans began to sense it too. They noticed how Jayna's voice softened when she said Ginny's name. How Ginny instinctively looked toward Jayna in crowded rooms. How moments of tension seemed to dissolve when they were together. It wasn't about romance or labels. It was about trust. What made their story resonate wasn't the breakdown itself. It was the response to it. In an industry that often rewards resilience at the cost of humanity, Jayna choosing not to leave, not to look away, not to treat vulnerability as weakness, felt profound. Ginny later spoke, indirectly, about learning to accept support. She didn't name names. She didn't recount the moment. But those who knew, understood. Growth had entered her life not through ambition, but through connection. Jayna never took credit. She never spoke about being there. That was never the point. For her, staying was natural. Caring wasn't a performance. It was a choice made quietly, repeatedly, without expecting recognition. And that's why everything changed. Not because Ginny broke down, but because when she did, Jayna didn't leave. That moment rewrote how Ginny viewed strength. It reshaped how people saw their bond. And it reminded everyone watching that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone isn't to save them, it's to stay. From that day on, whatever Ginny and Jayna shared was no longer fragile. It was rooted, built on the understanding that vulnerability, when met with compassion, doesn't weaken a bond. It transforms it. And that's why their story continues to matter. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was human. After that night, nothing was announced, nothing was explained, yet everything was different. Ginny didn't suddenly become open about her struggles, but the way she carried herself changed. She no longer rushed through moments as if stopping would cause everything to collapse. She allowed herself to sit quietly during breaks. She drank water slowly instead of forcing herself back into motion. These were small things, almost invisible, but for someone like Ginny, they were signs of healing. Jayna noticed every one of them. She didn't hover or ask questions that would make Ginny retreat. She understood that support didn't mean constant reassurance. Sometimes it meant walking at the same pace. Sometimes it meant standing nearby without saying a word. And sometimes it meant gently stepping in when Ginny didn't have the strength to speak for herself. On set, staff began to sense the shift. Ginny smiled more naturally, not the practiced smile she used for cameras, but a softer one that reached her eyes. Jayna, meanwhile, became quietly attentive. She remembered small details. She adjusted schedules when she could. She created space without making it obvious. There were moments when Ginny would pause mid-conversation, clearly overwhelmed, and Jayna would catch it instantly. A light touch on the arm, a subtle nod, a reason to step away. No one else needed to know why. Ginny did. Their conversations changed too. Where once they talked mostly about work, now there were longer silences that felt safe instead of awkward. Ginny didn't have to fill every gap. Jayna didn't rush to respond. They learned how to sit in shared quiet, and that quiet became one of the strongest parts of their connection. Fans began to notice again. They always do. Clips circulated online of Jayna's voice softening whenever she called Ginny's name, of Ginny instinctively turning toward Jayna before answering questions, of how their body language mirrored trust rather than tension. The conversations online weren't loud or chaotic. They were gentle, observant, respectful. People didn't ask, "What are they?" They asked, "Why does this feel so real?" What made it real was the absence of performance. There was no attempt to turn their bond into a story. No exaggerated gestures. No need to prove anything. They showed up day after day, choosing consistency over spectacle. There were still hard days. Ginny didn't stop feeling pressure. Jayna didn't magically remove the weight of the industry. But now, when those days came, Ginny didn't face them alone. And Jayna didn't try to fix what wasn't hers to fix. She simply stayed, just as she had that night. At one point, during a particularly exhausting stretch, Ginny quietly admitted something she had never said out loud before. She said she was afraid of disappointing people. Afraid that slowing down meant failing. Afraid that needing help meant she wasn't strong enough. Jayna listened without interrupting. Then she said something simple, something that stayed with Ginny long after. She said, "You don't disappear just because you rest." That sentence became an anchor. From then on, Ginny began to redefine what strength meant to her. Strength was no longer endurance at all costs. It was honesty. It was knowing when to lean. It was trusting that someone could see her at her weakest and still choose to stay. Jayna never asked for recognition. She never positioned herself as a savior. In fact, she treated the entire experience as something natural, almost obvious. Because to her, staying wasn't heroic. It was human. And that's what made their bond so powerful. As time passed, their connection deepened in ways that didn't need to be named. It became something steady. Something rooted in shared understanding. Something built not on perfection, but on presence. People around them often said there was a calm that followed them when they were together. a sense that whatever chaos existed outside the room couldn't fully enter. Ginny felt it too. She felt safer, more grounded, more herself. When asked in interviews about growth, Ginny spoke about learning to accept help, about unlearning the idea that independence meant isolation. She never mentioned Jayna by name, but her eyes always softened when she spoke. Jayna, when asked about support systems, spoke about listening, about knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, about staying, even when it's uncomfortable. Those who knew understood. The moment Ginny broke down wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The beginning of a bond defined not by tension, but by trust. Not by expectation, but by care. And that's why their story continues to resonate. Because it reminds people that sometimes the most life-changing moments don't happen under bright lights or loud applause. Sometimes everything changes in a quiet room, late at night, when one person falls apart and the other chooses not to leave.